Hello, everyone, and welcome to DNF. This is a Formula One podcast starring myself, Spencer Hall, and my co-host, Jessica Smetana. Wake up, Jessica. It's time to get out of the gym. It's time to get back into the office. The summer break is over. What will you miss most about the F1 summer break? For me, I will miss the hilarious sight of Yuki Tsunoda posting Instagram workout videos. That's right. And photos. Yuki posting photos on Instagram of him looking pretty ripped. Like,
Yeah. Oh
some
my
of this
God,
is
yeah.
angles in terms of size, but if I can just put on my Dr. Mike hat for a minute, legit cuts. Like, dude is legit cut. That's the thing I will miss most.
I'm glad you brought up that because you are sort of the expert in this between the
Mm-hmm.
two of us. I saw those photos that you're talking about of Yuki Tsunoda working out. And I wanted to ask you, like, should I be impressed by this? Because you know more than me. So the answer is yes, I presume.
I think so. He's here deadlifting what appears to be, his body weight, which is definitely about, that's impressive for his size. If you'll notice, Yuki, not a big guy. He's cut. He's got great definition. This is
Good
probably
form.
actually even above and beyond what he needs as an F1 driver. Typically, they're just big on core and the neck, and maybe some forearms to turn the wheel and strong shoulders. That's it. So he appears to be going above and beyond. That's good stuff, Yuki. It's
Good form.
absolutely good stuff. I say grade A workout content,
Okay.
particularly since we know Yuki does not particularly enjoy it.
Yeah, that's true. That was something that we learned on Drive to Survive. Well, first of all, Spencer, hello. When you said wake up, I legitimately thought you were like scolding me because I looked tired. Because I just finished doing a day of Batard show, and now I'm sitting here in the studio freezing my ass off. So if I look uncomfortable throughout this podcast, I am.
Mm-hmm.
It's very cold. And in juxtaposition to that is all of these photos of F1 drivers in
Mm-hmm.
the Mediterranean Sea on super yachts with their girlfriends and their dogs and their families. And that's what I always miss when summer break is over. I've seen Charles Leclerc on a yacht with his dog. I've seen Carlos
Yep.
Sainz on a yacht. I've seen George Russell on a yacht. I've seen Alex Albon on a yacht.
Mm-hmm.
Valtteri Bottas was cycling, so that was unique.
Yeah.
Um,
Valtteri was picking grapes as well as cycling. So in
yeah,
case you could not, if you were like, who's the most European man in the world at this moment, it was for at least a few minutes Valtteri Bottas for cycling, picking grapes, being named Valtteri Bottas, and probably having kind of a curious haircut.
yeah, definitely, and curious facial hair most of
Hmm.
the time. Lewis Hamilton was like all over the world during these last few weeks. I saw him at the Paris Olympics. One of his friends is a fencer on the U.S. team, so he was at that. And then he went to Morocco, Senegal, and Mozambique, where he visited a refugee settlement. So Lewis Hamilton has been very busy these past few weeks before coming back to Zandvoort, which is where the next F1 race is, which we will be, of course, talking about next week on next week's episode. So this is like our last, you know, uh, break episode where we're kind of just going to talk about some F1 news, some happenings, and sort of talk about where we're at so far with I think only 10 races to go, right? We've got a little bit more than halfway through the season.
Yep.
10 races to go, Spencer.
Yes, still a tremendous amount of racing to go. Things could get very weird. As we know in F1, they likely won't. However, there are still some very curious variables in play for the second half, or second 40% of the season, however you want to count it. I do want to go back and just say, Lewis making everyone look bad, traveling the world, being a global citizen, doing good stuff. And meanwhile, the more relatable of these is Joe Guan Yu. Joe Guan Yu just hanging out with his cat, man. That's it.
I love cat
Just sitting at
content.
home hanging out with his cat.
And speaking of cat people, Max Verstappen just posted a picture in like a little tub with a rubber duck. So I think he's just trolling people. But yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing probably of the last couple weeks has been this recent um, technical regulation change that has happened in Formula One. Spencer, this is getting very, very in the weeds on the sort of technical
Yeah, let's
regulation
go.
stuff
Yeah.
that I'm not really an expert at, but I will try my best to explain what happened here over the last couple weeks. And so it starts with the FIA rewriting an article, which is Article 11.2.1 of their technical regulations. So this is not a technical directive that was issued. This is just them adding basically a sentence to an existing technical regulation.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll read. This is going to get a little in the weeds, I think, for our listeners, but I will read what it previously said, what it says now, and then what maybe that could mean
Okay.
in any sort of practical sense. So previously it said, any system or mechanism that can systematically or intentionally produce asymmetric braking torques on a given axis is prohibited. And now it says that the braking system must be designed so that within each braking circuit, the forces applied to the brake pads are of the same magnitude and act as opposite pairs on a specific brake disc. Any system or mechanism that can systematically or intentionally produce asymmetric braking torques on a given axis is prohibited. So what this may mean, and what a lot of Formula One reporters and experts are speculating, is that perhaps a team was caught doing something that would violate this regulation, or found a loophole to go around this violation, around this regulation, I should say. So now the regulation has been sort of updated in a way, closing said loophole. And so there's lots of smoke, lots of speculation. Which team could have been doing this? Is this even a thing? Did anything even really happen? And obviously, we do not know the answers to that. However, Peter Windsor did tweet. This is an F1 person. I guess I should say like F1. How would you describe him? Like reporter, commentator,
Presence commentator.
Yes. Looks as though Red Bull Racing might have been running a clever rear cross-brake inertia valve before they were obliged to remove it before Miami. This could explain Max's Red Bull brake drama in Melbourne and his turn in grief in China. Interestingly, a Red Bull engineer replied, Callum Nicholas, and said, yeah, this is bullshit, unsurprisingly. He obviously not a team spokesperson, but someone that has worked on the cars. So I don't know where this leaves us. We don't really have a lot of information other than there was this change in verbiage or wordage of this technical regulation. But what do you think about all this?
That this is racing at its finest. Which is, oh, here's our set of rules. You didn't explicitly state that we couldn't do this. Therefore, we're going to do it. That's what Red Bull did. It's not the only trick that explains
Allegedly.
why Red Bull is so dominant in this era of racing, but I do think it's fascinating to note this. They're the only ones who did it. Presumably, they're the ones who got caught for it most notably. So it's intriguing to me. It's just a little peek behind the curtain of, well, why are they so good? And you go, well, it's probably because more than any other team, they look at the F1 Rex as a suggestion through which 1,000 little loopholes and innovations can be made. One person's innovation, by the way, is another person's unfair gambit. That's, I think, what we can take from this, that somebody would go, well, they can't do that. Somebody snitched. That's, to me, somebody snitched. Again, another classic F1 thing of one race team snitching on another.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really, I can't say for sure if I know that Red Bull did anything or if maybe another team did anything here, but I do think that like this is an interesting part of the sport, and one that I think can be very confusing for fans such as myself, in sort of understanding like the very like nitty gritty of these wordings in the technical regulations. And I think that the best comparison I can think of is like watching football and understanding the ways that Bill Belichick got really good at finding loopholes in certain NFL rules, and like being able to sort of like get something out of someone reads it and just reads it as it is, but you know, really, really good coaches will read it and like understand what it doesn't say. Right. So, I mean, I guess we could debate whether this is cheating, whether this is just sort of like built into F1 or any sort of those things. But I do find it very interesting, and I hope that more light is shed on like what actually happens, because when you have like a season like this season where there's been several teams where it seems like they've gotten a lot better over the last few races, and one specific team that seems to have gotten worse somehow, there are lots of, you know, really smart people that try to explain what's happening and what's going on, when in reality there may be something going on that like we just don't know about, and it doesn't, like F1 doesn't really want us to know about. And so I find all of this super interesting. But again, like I don't know if we'll ever find out more about this or if this will just be a sort of thing that just goes by the wayside and we just wonder in a few weeks if Red Bull's still not looking too hot after Zandvoort, oh, was maybe there's some truth to all of this.
Maybe. I do think there's another interesting point we're at, which is where we suddenly start doubting Red Bull at all. Something that feels very weird after the last 3 years, but we're there and we're not alone. For instance, if you had told me that a NASCAR driver before this season would have said, you know what, I'm better than Max Verstappen. I got this. I would have said, drinking's legal. You can be drunk and say whatever you want. But this is not a drunk person. This is a perfectly sober Kyle Larson, NASCAR driver,
Great segue.
who said this about Max Verstappen. I know in my mind I am better than him as an all-around driver. There's probably no way I could go win a Formula One race at Monaco, but I think I'd have a better shot at him just because of the car element. That's what gives me ease and confidence that, like, I know I'm better than him. Maybe not an open wheel Indy car or Formula One car, but that's one discipline. I think I would beat him in everything else.
Interesting. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I want to read what Verstappen responded with because I thought his answer was actually like kind of funny because he was like,
Yeah.
okay. But first, tell me a little bit about Kyle Larson. If I'm an F1 fan that doesn't watch any American motorsport, like, is this someone that just likes to brag and thinks he's the best and thinks he's the greatest, or is he actually like extremely skilled in multiple disciplines and has some sort of like history to back this up?
Well, Kyle Larson, by the way, he's not a spring chicken. Like he's on the dark side of 30 as a racer. He has my favorite nickname early on in his career, which was Young Money.
Young Money. Okay.
That's great. You should know that in terms of NASCAR, is he a competitive NASCAR guy? Yeah. He's got let's see, he's got 27 wins total. Like he's been very successful. He has wins at many different levels. Like he's raced the little cars. He's raced uh ARCA. He's raced at a bunch of different levels. So he's got a pretty diverse racing platform, or I'm sorry, portfolio in terms of claiming that he's a good driver. Would I at any point say that I would go, yeah, I'd take him over Max? No. No, like
Hmm.
not at all. Not a bit. I think that would be insane. Um, like I don't think he's a good driver and sometimes occasionally great. I cannot imagine him on the level of Max Verstappen. And by the way, I am taking into account what in my head, the little fantasy of Max as a NASCAR driver or on at another level, and trying to imagine that Max is not as aggressive in a car that can take more punishment and occupy more space on the road. That seems like madness. Uh, I
Hmm.
I would not under any circumstances take Kyle Larson over Max. The only thing I would ever bet against Max in swamp buggies because I saw Yuki Tsunoda in a Red Bull promotional beat him in a swamp buggy race. Everything else, I'm going Max. Like this
Yeah,
is what Max does in his like spare time. He
that is
imaginary
true.
races for fun.
Yeah, I think that that's like an underrated element of Verstappen's game here is that like he is a car freak too.
Hmm.
So his response was, I think I should say we should not have that debate. This is what Max Verstappen said.
Uh-huh.
So picture this in his voice. Everyone is good in their own right. Maybe if I would practice, I don't know, because I think at the end of the day, a good racing driver picks up things quite quickly. It
Yeah.
all depends what you grew up with as well. For me, of course, probably go karting and F1. These things are more natural to me than racing on dirt. I have no clue how to do that at the moment. So he was like, yeah, this is kind of like a stupid debate. I don't know. Like I think if I practiced really hard, I'd be good at anything. And that's a pretty normal, reasonable
Hmm.
take on it, I think. And also like it's kind of like one of those like unknowable I understand that like drivers do different races throughout their careers and try different things,
Hmm.
but it is sort of unknowable to just like drop like a Kyle Larson into Monaco. Like what are the conditions here? Does he have pole position? What car is he in? Like there's so many factors
Right.
that go into it. And so a lot of it is just kind of an unknowable but yet maybe sometimes fun debate.
There's only one driver that I would take as a NASCAR driver. I'm just speaking cross disciplines here, not just generally, but there's only one driver I know who I would take blind and say, I think he could be a successful F1 driver. That was in his prime, Jeff Gordon. I think Jeff Gordon could have been a successful F1 driver. I don't now I said successful. I'm not saying championship grade. I'm just saying I think he had the stuff. I think he had the right mindset, and I think he had the patience to make it happen. Don't know if that's true of Kyle Larson. That's a flat, like, don't know. I feel pretty sure that Jeff Gordon would have been successful. The other way, I can only base it on evidence, man. Kimi Räikkönen. Kimi Räikkönen is like the legendary Kimi Räikkönen, who actually did race it in the NASCAR Truck Series and was okay at it. You know, was not great by any stretch of the imagination. But then again, I know that because some of these guys can race anything. And that's a different skill, right? If you're a generalist, I think that's a different skill if you are a little bit good at everything and can translate that across multiple disciplines. Kimi races like little boats. Kimi races everything. Like, I kind of think maybe Valtteri is the same because he gets on a bike and goes, oh, time to race. And then he gets in a car and goes, oh, time to race. And if you put him on a donkey, he would be like, guess what? We go fast. Yeah, I think there are guys who are just great generalists, and I don't know frankly, I don't know if either Max or Kyle is one of those, but overall, I don't know. I've watched Max drive a lot, and it'd be real hard for me to imagine anyone being better at it.
Our producer Harry poses an interesting question, which is who's better at hypothetical sports competitions, Kyle Larson or Noah Lyles? That is wow.
Mm.
That's a tough one. So Noah Lyles, the American sprinter who said that he would what did he say? I don't know.
Oh,
Refresh
that
my
he was not the
memory.
world that if you were the world champion of the NBA, then you were really
Oh,
not
right.
world champion because
And then
the
he made
NBA
a
was
lot of
an
NBA
American
fans
league
mad.
and
Yeah.
track is, a global sport. And this is one of the worst debates because everyone's right.
Yeah.
Noah Lyles is right. And then Carmelo Anthony's response to this was the world comes to us for the NBA, which is by and large true. It is also true. Like, the thing you said is right. The NBA basically does hoover up the best players in the world. So, yeah,
Yeah.
you're all of you are right, but
It's a very
also
pedantic.
please love my sport and appreciate what I do. That's also a universal theme, in which we
Right.
do, right? Not like, you will get the anti-take from me is to go, yeah, Noah Lyles, you're right. Track and field's great. We don't pay enough attention to it. You're probably a superstar in Europe, and you walk down the street in the United States and nobody has any idea who you are, even though you just won a gold.
Tyreek Hill also challenged Noah Lyles to a sprint race.
Yeah.
So I like that a guy can go to the Olympics and win a gold medal, and everyone's like, "Hey, you're still wrong about that other stuff." Like,
Yeah.
everyone's still mad about it.
Thank you for your service. But
However, stop
however,
it. Oh man, I have missed the Olympics already. But it was a good distraction while F1 was gone. I'm not gonna lie.
yeah.
So, let's move on to another news item here. The Andretti antitrust investigation.
Hmm.
How much have you been following this sort of like ongoing public affair since the Formula One official denial of Andretti joining F1?
Not at all, because my general take on any you won't let us compete, so that's antitrust. It may very well have some legal grounding. However, it also to me says, please let me in your club where I would make everyone make less money. That's
Mhm.
like, I get that. I get why Liberty Media is going to fight this tooth and nail. It seems very simple to me. Could they get an antitrust call from the government at the moment? Maybe. Maybe this is a government that's been more willing than any in recent history to actually sort of look at the antitrust gun and go, don't make me use that.
Yeah.
So possibly it would also be one where, if that were true, it would be, we don't necessarily talk about what's right or wrong. You talk about what's politically advantageous for people here. Um, on the plus side, it's an American or largely American interest that's trying to break into an American owned but European perceived company, right? Like your circuit. So, most people would go, "Oh, F1, that's completely European." And that's like, yeah, it's sort of true in some ways. In this case, it would be very politically easy because you'd be like, "Well, this poor American company is being disadvantaged." Like if you were thinking politically, what would make sense here? But I think on the other hand, the facts don't bear that out. And in addition to that, there's also the why on earth, as a politician, do I want to throw my weight behind anything that my constituents are like, oh, that's that fancy racing, right? That's the fancy racing.
Yeah, so I guess like theoretically this would impact American jobs around the places where Andretti would be headquartered, right? Like they
Right.
would be, it's like Andretti, Cadillac, and they would be making parts, and I think they also would have like a home base in Silverstone too as well. Andretti, like that was their, it was like
Mm-hmm.
Indiana, Michigan, and the UK. And so there, I don't know. I mean, like this is like so. We got to get a lawyer on, Spencer. But you're
Mm-hmm.
right. Like at the Google antitrust thing, Google has just found that like they violated antitrust laws. So the DOJ is now investigating Liberty Media over all of this, and F1's stance basically from the start of denying Andretti entry has been that Andretti just wouldn't be competitive. It would
Mm-hmm.
be like it would just wouldn't work. They wouldn't be competitive, even though obviously fans of Formula One know that there's only 4 teams this year that actually are competitive in Formula One by any sort of metric.
Hey,
So
Aston
it's not a
Martin. Aston
great.
Martin's getting plenty of exercise and fresh air.
So that reasoning is possibly very questionable, and so I guess like the lawmakers' point of view is that this is from the letter that was written by Amy Klobuchar and signed by a bunch of lawmakers in the Midwest mostly. Which is
Mm-hmm.
that we have concerns that the rejection of Andretti Cadillac was based on a desire to exclude a rival from the racetrack, marketing opportunities, and prestige that competing in F1 can lend to a car manufacturer competing to sell cars across the globe. So I guess that's like part of the basis for um, them having an issue with this. And
Mm-hmm.
so now that the DOJ is involved, I believe that they have more like mechanisms for doing, investigations into this sort of thing. And then if they find sort of some wrongdoing or think they can win a case, they'll bring it to the DA. And of course, now this all like, we
Yeah.
have an election in however many weeks, terrifyingly. So this all will probably hinge on sort of what happens after that. And I think it's interesting to note that like Donald Trump was at an F1 race in Miami recently, and what that may mean if he's friendly with F1 sort of leadership with Liberty Media or not, I don't know, but he was, publicly seen with them at the Miami race. So, anyways, this is something that I'm sort of interested in. I'm keeping an eye on because again, I like the technical regulations. I understand like 80% of it, but man, there's that 20%. Ooh, I want to ask a engineer and a lawyer and just tell me what's going on here.
What we're going to do is we're
Help
just
me
going to
out.
take a look at at each presidential campaign and see where the donations are. I will also say this. If you were too broke to get an F1, you're probably going to be too broke to lobby properly. That's just my bet. Like if you getting a politician's attention in terms of campaign donations, go take a look at it. Go see at what scale Andretti would be competing here.
Well, apparently they had the money, so I don't know.
Yeah.
But
Well, let's see. We'll see how much they have. Because if you hear a
this,
politician going, "Well, I can't believe this company has been absolutely wronged,"
yeah, right. Then they have a lot of
you're
money.
like, "Oh,
Uh,
okay, Andretti got some cash. It's impressive."
this same letter that was written that I was just reading from, like they like this was a few months ago. I think this was in May. They like bodied a bunch of F1 teams too, and they were like, um, hang on, let me find this. Oh, here it is. The vast majority of F1 teams fail to win races in a given season. In 2023, a single team won all but one race, and half the teams in F1 have failed to win a race in the past 4 seasons combined. This competitive balance has not been the hallmark of F1 racing, and adding a team backed by a major U.S. car manufacturer is likely to enhance competitiveness, not reduce it. I just like that the Senate's like, last season was really boring in F1, and that's why you should let Andretti in, because your argument is bullshit.
You know what? You want to make arguments that can persuade people in real time. And that's one. If you go, hey, this is boring, this sucks. Should let in another team. See what they can do.
And me, like a neutral observer who's like, it would probably be cool to have another, like more teams I think would be good in F1. But at the same time, I understand that like, they
Mhm.
don't want to share all the revenue and stuff like that. I'm reading it and I'm like, man, that is crazy. I forgot Red Bull only lost one race last year. Man, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Anyways,
We are heading into the second half of the season.
we are.
The conclusion. Right now, as it stands, if we look at the Constructors Championship, we have Red Bull sitting at 408 in terms of points, McLaren at 366, Ferrari at 345. So not a huge gap between those two teams at all. Mercedes in fourth with 266. And then we progress through the also rans, goes Aston, RB Honda, Haas, Alpine, Williams, and then Kick, Sauber, Ferrari, Bottas, .com.biz. That's what we have in terms of the total order. However, it's a little more interesting than you might think. I think it's more interesting. Even the drivers' standings to me have a little bit of wiggle. Yes, Max is massively ahead by 78 points. Currently at 277 to Lando Norris at 199. Lando sitting in second. But then after that, you've got an intriguing muddle in that, 2 to 5, 2 to 6 space because Leclerc has 177 in third. Piastri in fourth has 167. Sainz has 162. And Lewis Hamilton has 150. There's a lot on the line here, not just in terms of actual results on the track and where teams will settle in the offseason, due to where they place. But I think a lot of stuff moving forward is weighted heavily on how the second half of the season. And by that, I mean into 25 and beyond. So do you want to play a little like upshift, downshift, a little
Ooh,
best case, worst case for, say,
sure.
the top 5 teams?
Let's do it. Should we top 5? I mean, okay.
Yeah,
Well,
we can.
that would include Aston Martin. And they're like 200 points behind Mercedes.
They are many points, many.
But okay, I'm down.
Yeah, best case, worst case for some of these teams is, just pick up some checks. Pick up some checks. Go see some interesting places.
Yeah.
Enjoy your job.
Get a lot of Hilton points.
But think of like a sports writer, Jessica. That's right. A lot of Hilton and Marriott points
Get your
are
Delta
just
1
waiting out
points.
there.
Okay, let's do it. All right. Do we want to start from the top or from
I do.
bottom up? Okay.
Currently in the lead in the Constructors Championship, Red Bull. Best case, Jess.
Best case for Red Bull, they win both championships without a lot of controversy.
Mhm.
And I think Sergio Perez sort of like pulls his weight for the rest of the season. And like, I think we should probably state that these aren't predictions and these aren't things that will happen or are likely to happen. These are best case scenarios. Best case scenarios, Sergio makes it to Q3 for the rest of the season, which is not something that's likely to happen given the way his season started. But
Yeah.
I think like Red Bull, when you have competitive McLarens chasing you and competitive Mercedes and Ferraris chasing you, having both cars being able to finish with good points is going to be really important to get the Constructors Championship.
Yeah, agreed. That's their best possible case. I think the worst case for Red Bull, that's where we start writing a little bit of like, fan fiction for other teams.
Mhm.
The worst case is that the vibes about Max wanting out at one point become stronger. We get a lot more public sniping and a lot more kind of backdoor sniping in the press, a lot of leaks, a lot of, team sources tell me Max Verstappen is very unhappy. Additionally, you get more steam coming out of the ongoing tension between the principals at Red Bull. That really has not gone away. It's just been quieter, but it's still very present in terms of who will be there post 2024. And then I think of Sergio Perez's nervous breakdown just sort of, continues, like his
Yeah.
spiral. He's recovered a little bit, but on the whole, if he continues this kind of performance in the second half of the season, that's not going to help the mood or the air in the garage at all. Notice I didn't mention Max's on-track performance because the idea of him being even a step worse, like if his performance degrades somewhat over the second half of the season, he's still the best driver and in the best car. So
Mhm.
that to me seems like that to me seems like the steady thing in both best and worst case scenario because I don't see him falling off a whole lot.
Yeah, maybe the best car, but a best car I
A
think is
best
fair.
car.
A best car. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think from like a from like a non-racing standpoint,
Hmm.
like a lot could go wrong within Red Bull, within like the sort of like horrible things that we've heard that have been happening,
Hmm.
allegations that have been made there. From like a racing standpoint, yeah, Max wanting out at the end of the year, I think would be a pretty big blow. A sort of like schism between the top people in charge of like Red Bull, and Red Bull
Yeah.
Formula One, I think would be pretty bad. And Sergio Perez just having the sort of like forgettable season that, sticks with fans. Like he's been a fan favorite for so long and has been
Hmm.
like someone that people really like as a driver and has been like a fun driver to watch for a long time. And so like if this is the end of his, Red Bull career and the end of his, career in F1 in a top team, finishing that in like a really like sad way, I think would
Hmm.
be pretty upsetting for fans. So that would be probably worst case scenario for him is like this season kind of just continues to be what it has been till now and everyone leaves like with a bad feeling about it.
It's time for papaya. Number two,
Mhm.
McLaren. McLaren. Best case IMO is not the craziest idea in the world. They win this whole thing. Like that's
Ooh.
you're gonna need a hot streak. You're gonna need an impressive performance, but it's not one that by trajectory they're not capable of. Right. I mean, I think they are capable of, given how much they've improved, if they somehow manage to continue that and Red Bull continues to sort of either plateau or come down a little bit in terms of overall performance, why not? Like crazier things have happened. McLaren, it's not likely in my eyes, but like that is the best case that they go out and get a constructors championship out of this.
Yeah. Best case is like they start being able to make decisive choices during races to set up both of their drivers for reasonable
Hmm.
success. But yeah, the worst case is like the flip side of that, which is that we've got a real issue on our hands next year because both
Hmm.
Oscar and Lando show you that they can both win, and McLaren has to decide who is actually going to be their number one driver, and like I guess the worst side of that would be they don't decide that, which is kind of what happened in the last
Yeah.
race, and like shit hits the fan for everyone. So yeah, I mean, they could end up with like half of these things. They could end up winning the constructors championship, but at what cost? Like everyone
Yeah.
hates each other now. But yeah, or they could lose it and still end up in a sort of like awkward battle with two young drivers that have both proven themselves at times and both also had times where, they've shown they're not quite ready yet. And so there's 10 races left where I think McLaren has to sort of sort those things out.
Yeah. I think that is the best, the worst, or that is the worst. The next one on our list, I want you to do this best one because I'm not
Oh.
quite so rosy on them. Um, Ferrari. Ferrari.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like best case scenario, we should have known it already happened. They like Charles won at Monaco. Well, we're asking for too much now. They did the thing, and they sold their souls for the rest of the season. What more can you ask? But I mean, yeah, it's just I guess best case scenario is like they make some competent choices throughout the rest of the year, finish maybe like in third in the constructors, or uh, just yeah, I don't know. I mean, Ferrari's still very fast and very good, but like they're still not. It's crazy to see how quickly McLaren has sort of like leapfrogged them this year alone.
Yeah.
So I guess best case scenario, Charles wins another race or Carlos wins another race, um, and they finish in third place probably.
Yeah. Um, the worst case is that they just super Ferrari this, that they just go full mega Ferrari fiasco where, lightning strikes Charles, every single time he takes the track. Maybe literally, hopefully not. I mean more metaphorically, but I never rule that out when it comes to this version of Ferrari. That Carlos has just checked the hell out because he's already got his ride for next season and nothing's at stake. They tank and that they somehow lose to Mercedes the constructors. That would be the ultimate disaster for Fred Vassar and his friends in red. Our final one, fasting one,
Oh wait,
Mercedes.
I have hold on. I have one more worse step than that. Lewis Hamilton changes his mind. And he's like, I'm staying at Mercedes. I'm not coming to Ferrari anymore.
You know what? You're not even joking. You're not like totally a possibility. Yeah.
It's F1. We know these contracts, like they don't mean anything.
I know.
What is a contract anyways?
When you sign a contract across that many countries, it just doesn't, it's just like, doesn't matter.
Whose jurisdiction is this? I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll get our whoever we get on to be our law expert about the Andretti antitrust case can explain that one to us.
Yeah. And yeah, real quick, Mercedes just, man, the best case, Lewis just continues to improve a little bit. George stops making the kind of mistakes that seem to bedevil him from time to time, and they cheerfully punt because that's pretty much what they've been doing for a couple of years now. They cheerfully punt on this car and move on. That feels like the best possible case for Mercedes.
I think numerically, if all of the drivers ahead of Lewis just suck for the rest of the season and he wins every race, he could win the drivers' championship. So
yeah,
let's put that one out there. I'm trying to do math really fast in my head and I can't, but I don't think he's out of it yet. So if we're talking best case scenario, that one's got to be in play. Not that it'll happen, but yeah, I mean, best case scenario is that look, Lewis is one of the only drivers this season to win multiple races. So yeah, win a few more races. It was awesome when he won in Silverstone. Fans love that. It was great.
And then worst case, I mean, kind of where they are, because you can't. How's this? You're not gonna fall down to Aston. That's the good news. No matter how badly this goes, you probably won't have a Lewis George feud because Lewis is on the way out, and George just doesn't seem to be the kind of guy who would go sour. But who knows? Maybe we just get evil George for the rest of the rare appearance of evil George every single race. That could happen as well.
Yeah, I mean, so had the whole weight thing not happened at the last race, I feel like the worst case doesn't feel like it could be as bad, but now I'm worst case is George just stinks for the rest of the season, and Mercedes is oh no, Lewis is leaving, and we don't know. We've put all our eggs in the George Russell basket, and it has toppled over. So I don't know if that is likely, but I guess there could be some regression with the Mercedes and end up sort of where they were to start the season, and then but also next year you don't have Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah, yeah. So much.
I don't know.
There's so much to come.
Fun times. And Zandvoort this weekend. So Max is looking to win his 4th home race in a row, which is something that's only happened 3 other times in F1 history. Lewis Hamilton, of course, one of the drivers that has done that at Silverstone. And also read this little stat in Motorsport Magazine. Red Bull is winless over the last 4 races for the first time since 2020. That's crazy. And it's going to rain all weekend, apparently. So we're in for perhaps a treat, Spencer.
Anything to liven up a race where there isn't a whole lot of room to move, because this is a twisty, windy track that is very narrow. Passing will be at a premium. Much easier to pass somebody if they happen to have slid off the curve in front of you. So that would be the one thing that I think would make this race extremely compelling, is kind of a wet mess. Bad news for those expecting different results. Max Verstappen loves running in the rain. So we will see coming up Zandvoort in the Netherlands this weekend. F1 is back, and so are we. For Jessica, Smetana, and myself.
We never really left.
Thank you. Like, subscribe, follow, rate, send us checks through the mail. Cash is also fine. Just leave it on our
Venmo.
doorsteps.
Spencer, we should make Kyle Larson and Max Verstappen foot race. But they have to wear their little like shoes that they wear when they drive. I love those things.
Yeah, that's again, my money
and
is
Noah Lyles
my money
too.
is not on
But
the 32-year-old here. My money
Noah
is
Lyles backwards and Tyreek Hill also backwards.
no.
Let's do that.
If Kyle wants to win something, make Max Verstappen throw a football, because as we know, all Europeans are terrible at throwing a football.
Free throw contest.
Yeah.
Play horse.
Yes, we are bad at soccer. They are bad at football.
Okay.
Thanks, y'all.
All right. Bye.